Good evening, everybody. How are you all doing?
Thanks.
So, I can't tell you what a great pleasure and privilege it is for me to be here. I've been your fan for the longest time, been following your career, so it's just incredible, an incredible moment for me. But the first thing
I'm going to go now. It doesn't get better than that.
But the first thing I'm going to ask you is something I've been asked to ask you, which is, what were you like as a boy?
Well, firstly, can I just say, the reason I'm in New York this week is for this Juggernaut event. There's also a UN event taking place, but that's of secondary importance. The first thing, Amitav, when I was a boy, I was the same height I am as a man. And so some things don't change, but I was a normal, Londoner as a boy. I come from a big family. I have 6 brothers and 1 sister. As I say to my mum regularly, the reason why I'm perfect is I was in the middle. So I got 3 older brothers and 3 younger brothers and an older sister. We're a close family. Always been very close. We're still very close. My father passed in 2003, but we're a very close family. We live nearby. My mother has 23 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren, and so we're still very close and very tight. But the thing about our family is, and it will apply to many of you, I'm sure, is I think we proved that it's possible to be incredibly proud of our ethnicity. We're of Pakistani ethnic origin, South Asian heritage, of our Islamic faith. I'm a Muslim, but also proud to be a Londoner, proud to be a Westerner, proud to be British, just like many of you here are proud Hindus, Sikhs, or Muslims, but also proud Americans, proud Westerners. And we've always considered ourselves British and Londoners, but never forgetting our heritage and so forth.
And your family is originally from Lucknow, and then they moved to Pakistan. So, have you ever been to Lucknow? Do you keep any connections?
Yes, we got family. So I tell like in America, we have people in the UK who can sometimes be a bit racist and a bit prejudiced. And I don't mean your last president, who is both. So my story. So my grandparents, on both sides, maternal and paternal, are in Lucknow, UP. And after partition, they migrated. As many of you know the story, in '47, because they were Muslims, they migrated to the Muslim majority Pakistan. So my grandparents are migrants. My parents migrated to the UK. So I'm the first Khan in 3 generations who's not going to be a migrant. I'm going nowhere.
Did you grow up speaking Urdu, and how good is your Urdu now?
Urdu मेरी ठीक है. मैं उर्दिश बोलता हूँ. जो उर्दिश है ना, उर्दू और अंग्रेजी हम बोलते हैं उर्दिश. For those that don't speak Urdu, I said, isn't Amitav a handsome and good-looking man?
The story goes that a teacher once told you to become a lawyer because you have an argumentative personality.
Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown. So I did science A-levels. We have A-levels. So when you're between 16 and 18, you specialize in the subjects. And I'm scared of blood, so I couldn't be a doctor. So like a lot of children of Asian origin, the next best thing was a dentist. If not an engineer. And so I was doing, maths, chemistry, biology, A-levels, destined to be London's finest dentist. And two things happened. One is people of a certain age may remember a program called LA Law. Jimmy Smits, Harry Hamlin, and a great cast. And this a fictional program about lawyers in LA, charismatic, good-looking, acting for the underdog. And that had an impact on me. But also my maths teacher, Mr. Brown, when he discovered I wanted to be a dentist, says, listen, Sadiq, you're always arguing so much. Why don't you consider being a lawyer? And that began the journey into being a lawyer.
But I gather at a certain point you were also a stand-up comedian.
Yeah. So here's the thing. So I gave up being a comedian to be a politician. You had a president for 4 years that was a comedian whilst being a president. But look, well, I do, whilst I was a member of Parliament, to fundraise for the Labour Party, which is the sister party to the Democrats, I would do a routine. I had a 10-minute routine in relation to politics, observation, so forth, and people who weren't just my friends, but strangers would often laugh. So yeah, but yeah, it was to raise money for the Labour Party.
Oh, okay. So you've made air pollution a major plank of your mayoral career. Why is air pollution so important for you, and what have you actually been able to achieve in relation to air pollution in London?
Well, on a serious note, so when I was a lawyer, my passion was, and I specialised in human rights law, and a lot of the cases I brought were to do with addressing social injustices and racial injustices, and my motivation to be a politician was to address social injustice and racial injustice. And I like to think I'm pretty well read, pretty well informed, and so forth. But in 2014, I agreed to run the London Marathon to raise money for charity. And before I ran the marathon, my wife and my chief of staff, who's here tonight, Ali Picton, because they had no confidence in my fitness and my health, demanded I have a full medical to make sure that I was healthy, fit, and so forth. And so I had a full medical before I ran the marathon. And then I trained for the marathon in 8 weeks, ran the marathon, raised lots of money. But a few months later, I started noticing I was breathless. When I was playing football, I would, you call it soccer, we call it football. It's football. When I was running for the ball, I'd be tired and out of breath, and and so I went to the doctors, was diagnosed with adult onset asthma. And I said, I don't understand, how did I get asthma? And I discovered that you can't see this. It's called nitrogen dioxide, nitrogen oxide, particulate matter. It's in New York as well, and it can make you sick. It can make children have stunted lungs, adults with a whole host of health issues from asthma to cancer, dementia to heart disease. And it upset me that I was doing something I enjoyed, running in the city I love, London, and I became unwell. And so I started looking into this issue. And so when I became mayor, King's College University did some research which said that on our policies before I became mayor, it would take 193 years to bring the air in London within lawful limits. Now, I eat pretty healthy, but I'm not going to live for 193 years. And so we need action now. Good news, King's College say with the policies we've got, the air within London will be within lawful limits, not by 193 years, by 2025.
Amazing. But some of your policies in relation to pollution and climate have been quite unpopular as well, haven't they, amongst Londoners? Isn't that a sort of major problem for anyone confronting climate change today? How do we think in the long term, and how do we get people to accept these long-term policies instead of like these short-term gains?
It's a really profound question you ask, and this is the conundrum that politicians face in a whole host of issues. And it's that classic dilemma between following public opinion, and leadership, changing public opinion, but always being respectful that people sometimes have genuine concerns that deserve and demand addressing. And the phrase used by experts in this field of environment is a just transition. And here's one of the ironies about climate change and air pollution. It's those least responsible for climate change or air pollution who suffer the worst consequences. So think of the global south, Bangladesh, parts of India, Pakistan, Sub-Saharan Africa, the West Indies. They're least responsible for climate change. They suffer the worst consequences. Think about the consequences of air pollution in London or New York. Those least likely to own a car suffer the worst consequences. So yeah, you're right. You know, there are some people with genuine concerns, and we've been responding to those concerns with financial support to help them make the transition. And it's really important to be respectful of concerns people have. It could be those who live in the global south who are now saying, hold on a sec, you're saying we can't have, coal-fired power stations, you've spent the last 200 years becoming wealthy on the backs of coal-powered fire stations. So you've got to be supporting that transition, whether it's the wealthier countries supporting the poorer countries, or in a city like London, City Hall, Transport for London, supporting those families and businesses and charities make that transition. And the good news is, we've brought in the ultra-low emission zone in 3 phases: central London, inner London, outer London. At each stage there's been concerns, which we've sought to address, and at each stage people have been won over by the results. And the evidence is really important. I speak, as a former lawyer, evidence is important to me. The evidence of air pollution kills prematurely, makes people unwell. The evidence of our policies of ULEZ, it works.
So, in relation to this sort of just transition, I mean, after all, New Delhi, Lahore are 2 of the most polluted cities in the world. What can London do to help cities like New Delhi and Lahore? And would you be open to technology transfers?
Yeah, so one of the pleasures of my job being the Mayor of London is it enables me to also, I've been very fortunate to be elected the chair of C40. C40 is a group of cities around the world. They include Delhi, Mumbai and others. And there's 97 of us, and we represent more than 700 million citizens across the globe. Global South, Global North, Paris, New York, London, Madrid, Barcelona, Dhaka, Karachi, Delhi, Mumbai, and so forth. And we work together, sharing best practice and so forth. And one of the promises I made when I became chair of C40 is at least 2/3 of our budget must go to the Global South. We've got to be supporting them make that transition. One of the things we've done over the last couple of years is seeing the lessons from London and support other cities to do that. I'll give you an example. In my first year as mayor, I realized, look, if I didn't know the consequences of air pollution, why would Londoners? So the first year as mayor, we installed air quality monitors all across our city, so Londoners could know how good or bad the air was, to educate them in an unpatronizing way why we need to take tough action to clean the air. That gave me permission to have bold policies. So we're now rolling out air quality monitors across the globe. It's called, Breathe Global. And we're trying to make sure that other cities have the information. Once they've got the information, they can have bold policies to address this. Because the problem with air pollution is you can't see it and you can't smell it often. It's an invisible killer. And so we've got to be helping people understand the issue, understand the consequences, provide solutions. And that could be financial assistance, it could be air quality monitors, but never patronizing. We're not going to have this sort of, Western savior complex. Often, cities in the Global South can teach us things. I was with the mayor of Freetown today in Sierra Leone. Freetown are planting trees, which is basic photosynthesis, taking carbon out of the atmosphere, but also stops mudslides. We in London now are also planting trees because of global warming and climate change. And so it's really important to learn from each other as equal partners.
Are you subsidizing new solar transitions for Londoners? And what are you doing about the heat waves? Because London, they probably need a lot of air conditioning, which they don't have.
Yeah. So firstly, listen, for those who were in New York on Monday, I did not bring the rain. And so it was sunny when I left London. But it's really important we provide this just transition also when it comes to solar, wind, renewables. And so, as the mayor, we've got a number of schemes to address these issues. So we've planted. I was going to say I've planted. I didn't personally plant them. We've planted almost 500,000 trees. Helps with cooling. We have more electric buses than any city in the Western world, Western Europe. Half our taxis are now electric. We're supporting businesses transfer to renewables, going from fossil fuels to wind and solar. We're supporting homes and businesses to retrofit their buildings, insulation, glazing, and so forth. We're also making sure that we support people make this transition by subsidies, because people can't do it alone. We've got a green bond in London. I've put in some money from City Hall. We're bringing in private sector money to have green finance as well. And we learn from each other. So working with the Mayor of New York, there are now 14 cities, including London, who've divested our pensions away from fossil fuels to the tune of $400 million away from fossil fuels to good green stuff. So we're making a sort of a virtuous circle where we can be taking money out of bad stuff and investing it in good stuff.
It's really great to hear about all these visionary things that you're doing. But at the same time, as you must know, I mean, the top leadership of the UK today, I mean, they're sort of turning their backs on their climate pledges and so on. What do you think of that? I mean, is this a pattern that we are going to have? I mean, Democrats sponsor some kind of climate policies, and Republicans come and turn them all over.
So the British government is a conservative government, which is similar to the Republican Party. And before I get to talk about Rishi Sunak's policy, his speech today, I just want to say this point. So Rishi Sunak and I are from different parties. I am so proud the Prime Minister of the UK is of Indian origin and Hindu faith. It's a source of pride to me. And the reason why I mention that is because it's a true story. So I was at the coronation of King Charles III, really, really historic day. And somebody said to me, he's from Mumbai. He said, "You know what, Sadiq? Your country has obviously a mayor of Islamic faith, a Muslim. You've got a prime minister of Hindu faith, and you have a king who is Christian. Surely now is the time to make Amar Akbar Anthony king." I said, you can tell the king the premise of the story about three kids separated at birth. So look, yes, there's great pride that Rishi Sunak's the Prime Minister of the UK, but his policies are bad for my city, bad for my country, and bad for the planet. Why do I say that? Because for the short-term reasons you alluded to, he's seeking to weaponize the issue of climate change, and what he's done today is row back on some of the commitments my country made to tackle the climate emergency and get to zero carbon, because he thinks it's politically expedient to do so because it may win him some support. I think he's wrong in relation to doing so, but also my concern is this. I think actually what sometimes you should do if you're smart is turn a crisis into an opportunity. So we've got a climate change crisis. Why don't we use this as an opportunity to be investing in renewables, solar, wind, another new innovation? Why don't we use this as an opportunity to become energy secure so we're not relying upon fossil fuels from overseas? Why don't we use this as an opportunity to invest in future-proof, high-skilled jobs? Who's going to make the electric buses, the electric taxis, the wind turbines, the solar panels, the electric vehicle charging points? And actually, President Biden, to give him credit, has passed the Inflation Reduction Act. What that's leading to is a just transition. So if you work in a car factory making internal combustion engines, you know there's a pathway to a good job making electric vehicles. If you're BMW, you're not thinking, where shall I open my factory? I'll tell you what, I'll open it in America because the government's giving us subsidies. That's the sort of smart things governments are doing. And what Rishi Sunak's done today, I think, is bad politics, bad for the country, it's bad for business, it's bad for the environment, it's bad for the health, and it's bad for the planet.
I completely agree with you.
But I'm Akbar Anthony too.
There you are. So, you mentioned Rishi Sunak and so on, but you were really the first among a generation of South Asian politicians who've sort of made it to the top.
That's very kind, thank you.
In the UK. I went to university at Oxford in the 80s, and I can tell you that we faced racism on an everyday basis, an incredible amount of racism. If you told me then that this kind of political scenario would happen, I wouldn't have believed you. What do you make of it? What changed?
Well, listen, so my family story is similar to your experience. So when my parents first came to London, they were faced with signs at guest houses, community centres saying, no blacks, no Irish, no dogs. And by blacks, they meant anybody, a person of colour. You know this, Amitav. And within one generation, we've gone from that to the Mayor of London being not just an ethnic minority, not just a religious minority, but at a time of heightened Islamophobia, somebody of Islamic faith. And that shows the progress that can be made. But it's worth reminding ourselves that progress was hard fought. Politicians, community leaders, civic organisers, ordinary citizens working incredibly hard. But here's the thing we've got to understand and be vigilant of. That progress is not inevitable or one way. You can have regression as well. I was joking about President Trump. Around the globe, you have seen the rise of nativist populist movements in recent years that have been unthinkable, 10 years ago. Hungary, Poland. We saw 4 years of President Trump in the UK. The Brexit Party's got some policies that are extremely controversial. In France, the candidate who came second to President Macron was, Le Pen, and so forth. And so, Brazil, until recently, was led by, Bolsonaro. So I think we've all got to understand, and I say this deliberately to the audience here because I suspect many of you are incredibly successful and doing very well. Don't underestimate the importance of, being active. One of the things I've sought to do in London is to turn what tends to be people who are passive consumers into active citizens. Because unless we're vigilant and, always active, we can go backwards. And it's really important to do so. So listen, the credit to, for me being the mayor, doesn't go to me. It's because we've got a great city in London. And I stand on the shoulders of people like you and others who fought the racists, who fought the prejudice, who educated the ignorant to make sure people understood that actually, diversity is a strength, not a weakness. Diversity is a strength, not a weakness. It makes us richer, not poorer. It makes us stronger, not weaker. And, one of the things I've been really proud of as mayor is saying, listen, we don't just tolerate difference in London. We embrace it, we respect it, we celebrate it. So I'm incredibly proud to be the first mayor that goes every year to an event we organise in Trafalgar Square called Diwali in the Square. We organise Vaisakhi in the Square in Trafalgar Square. We organise Eid in the Square in Trafalgar Square. I go to Hanukkah in the Square. We organise a Christmas tree. We organised an Easter event. We organised, Black in the Square. And so it's really important to give people a sense of belonging, but also to invite others. I don't want just Hindus to go to Diwali in the Square. We have others going as well. That the love and affection that I receive when I go to the temples and the gurdwaras and the synagogues, it's sometimes better than the mosques. Which says more about my relationship with my mom, but that's what you want, right? That sort of, that London for everyone.
Well, it's interesting you mention the mosque. I mean, what does being Muslim mean to you?
Well, look, for me, it's an intrinsic part of who I am. It's from the moment I wake up and I perform my Fajr prayers during the course of the day. The way I conduct myself, I hope I give the best version of what being a Muslim means. I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect. I do lots of things that I probably shouldn't be doing, and that my imam and mum would not be pleased about. But I try my best, right? I try my best, and it's really important to understand that none of us needs to be perfect. You gotta have a good heart, and the right intention, and just do your best. And so, look, I've never been embarrassed or ashamed of being a Muslim, right? And one of the things that upset me during 2016 was the idea that people were given these are respectable people, that it's inconsistent to be a Westerner and a Muslim. It's inconsistent to be a proud Westerner and a proud Muslim. The idea you could have an immigration policy where you prohibit people coming from Muslim majority countries because of their faith, and it's really important, to address that and take that on, not to just be quiet and let that go on, because it's safety in numbers, but also you've got to show allyship. And what was great about some of the issues during 2016 going onwards with Islamophobia, we've seen it since 9/11, is that allyship, that sense of solidarity, where other people from different faiths are coming together to respond and stuff. But I'm a very proud Muslim. I'm somebody who's very proud of my ethnicity, but incredibly proud to be British, incredibly proud to be a Londoner as well.
Well, you mentioned populism a moment ago, and it's interesting that if you look across Europe now, in Italy, you have a literal fascist government in place, and she seems to be extremely competent as well. So she's sort of cementing her power. Do you at all worry about some sort of far-right backlash in the UK?
I think all of us are going to be vigilant for that sort of situation in relation to the rise of the far right. Whether it's in Charlottesville or London.
Yes.
And that's why it's really important to educate people about the history, the civil rights movement, about Selma, about what we saw in London, in Southall and Brixton, or what we've seen in other parts of Europe. And look, the reality is this: there are ethnic minorities and religious minorities in the West, and indeed in the East. And globalization makes that, be a situation where it's going to accelerate, I think, rather than decelerate. And we've got to use every opportunity we can to bust myths, to educate the ignorant, to put the hand of friendship out, and to address issues that can be used to turn people a certain way. And I think, I've been a politician now for some time. I think in politics, there are basically two types of politicians. There is the first type of politician who plays on people's fears. The reason why you can't get decent housing, the reason why you can't get decent healthcare, the reason why crime is going up is because of the other. ... It could be the immigrant, the black person, the Hindu person, whatever. That's the first type of politician. He or she plays on people's fears. The second type of politician is a politician that addresses people's fears. So your concerns about a lack of decent housing or decent healthcare or crime being high is a genuine concern. It's a genuine concern you have. That's your experience. Let me address your concern. Let me explain to you the reason why there's no decent housing is because the mayor or the governor or the government hasn't invested in decent housing. They'd rather have luxury homes. The reason why there's not decent healthcare is because of lack of a decent insurance scheme and lack of investment. The reason why crime's gone up is because there's been austerity, cutting police officers, cutting youth clubs and youth workers, so young people hang around the street corner and have nothing to do. So that's addressing people's fears. And I think I'd like to be that sort of politician that addresses people's fears, comes up with solutions, rather than one that plays on people's fears. And I think progressives have got to understand that, with people's limited attention spans, people being busy, we've got to be far better at addressing people's fears, whilst not in any way dismissing them. I think the worst thing we can do is dismiss people's fears, because people have genuine concerns.
Absolutely. But leading up to Brexit, we saw that there was a big divide between London and other cities and rural areas. So what has Brexit meant for London? How do you see London's role in the global economy today? Has that changed?
So the Brexit campaign is fascinating, because the Brexit campaign was very, very similar to what I've set out. What the Brexiteers did was play on people's fears. So the reason why you've not got decent healthcare or decent housing, the reason why you've lost your job, can't get a job, is because of the European Union. It's the other. So let's leave the European Union, and we'll be embarking on the land of milk and honey. Let me tell you, 7 years after leaving the EU, there is no milk and honey. Things are bad. GDP down by about 5.5%. Investment in goods and services, investment down by 11%. Goods and services trade down by 7%. Price of food gone up by 13%, and so forth. So it's not been good for our country. A lot of the Brexit vote, though, was heart, not brain. It was an emotion. And I understand and I respect that, and we've got to recognise it as an issue. So my view is this. The most successful countries do the most trade with their neighbours. It's common sense, obviously. And the way to do more trade with people is to have alignment of policies rather than divergence of policies. And I'm afraid, the current government that we've got, believes in divergence. That we've got an extreme hard Brexit. And what I'm hoping is, there's a general election in the UK probably next year. Indeed, there's a presidential election in your country next year. There's also, by the way, a mayoral election in London next year. The most important of those three elections taking place. And so what I'm hoping the next Prime Minister of the UK, who's hopefully is a Labour Prime Minister, does, is to negotiate a closer ties with the European Union, alignment. There's better trade ties, better education ties, better social ties, better cultural ties. And that will lead to, hopefully, a more prosperous UK and a more prosperous European Union.
Well, since you mentioned the election, I can't help asking you what's next after being a mayor. I mean, we would so much like to see you at the head of the Labour Party. So much better than Keir Starmer.
Well, Now I'm going. Listen, I'm hoping for a gig on the Juggernaut because the followers these guys have got, man. I mean, so I said, forget. I mean, this is me bragging in case my mum's watching or listening. But so I was at the UN today addressing the United Nations. But this is what it's all about, being a Juggernaut. So next for me is working for the Juggernaut, I think. You know? Yeah, thank you. Bless you, Sridhar.
So finally, what do you have to say to New Yorkers about their city? How does it compare with London?
Listen, can I just say how much I love New York and how lucky you are to live in the second greatest city in the world. I love New York. It's a great city. I love your diversity. I love your energy. I think you're bouncing back after the pandemic. And genuinely, remind yourselves why you love New York. But also recognize that all of you have a responsibility to keep New York being as brilliant as it is. I was teasing my team earlier on this week. I've been here since Sunday night, going back tonight to London. The only other city in the world I would live, and that includes the UK, is New York. And that's the best compliment I can give you. So easy ones for me, difficult ones for Amitav. Yeah? That's the deal. It should be on, yeah. Yeah, great question. It's Sajana. Great question. So look, I think one of the issues, and I've learned this in campaigns that I've observed, is often politicians are really poor storytellers. We use science rather than art. And I think art is really important in telling a story. And one of the politicians who, he's my favorite politician of all time, is a guy called President Jed Bartlett. A close second is President Barack Obama. But it's the ability to tell stories which is really important, because you've got to try and inspire people to register to vote and then to turn out and vote. You've got to try and, in a situation where people are cynical, apathetic, sometimes hostile, sometimes fatalistic. In fact, I've written a book about this. It's called Breathe, available from good bookshops. But on a serious note, but you're spot on about storytelling. And so the reason why I told you my story about the marathon was to explain to you my motivation for tackling air quality and climate change. But actually, what inspired me wasn't my own illness. I met a woman called Rosamund Adu Kisi Deborah. And Rosamund's story broke my heart to the extent where even now I get upset when Rosamund is with me. Because Rosamund had a daughter called Ella. Ella was somebody diagnosed with very serious asthma. And she passed away aged 9 on February the 14th, 2013. And for a number of years, 2 years before then, she'd have regular asthma attacks. And Rosamund couldn't work out why the asthma attacks were happening. After she passed, she met a fantastic expert, a world-leading expert, and they sat down and they worked out that the days when Ella had an asthma attack, was rushed to hospital, or mum had to do CPR on her, coincided with days when there was bad traffic outside her home and air pollution was high. And you could draw a graph, one on top of the other, explaining that one was linked to the other. And Ella is the first ever person in the world on whose death certificate the cause of death is written air pollution. And the reason why I tell you Ella's story is, even if you think, I've not been able to explain the case in relation to why we should be tackling air pollution. And by the way, the great thing about tackling air pollution, the same things that cause air pollution cause climate change. If you deal with one, you deal with the other. And as somebody who's of South Asian origin, I love 2-for-1s. And so, so we in the last 4 years haven't just improved the air in London, we've reduced carbon emissions equivalent to 1.1 million flights from London to New York.
Hi, my name is Amna, and I'm a management consultant. I have 2 questions. The first question everybody wants to know. Okay, one question.
Ask one question in 2 parts.
One question in 2 parts. Did you fly business class or economy here? Everybody wants to know.
I fly economy.
And second question is, since I work in finance, what are you doing post-Brexit to maintain London as an attractive center for financial services firms? That's a big question.
Great. So the first answer, I flew economy, and I'm flying back tonight economy. Man of the people. But genuinely, I'm flying economy. And secondly, you raise a really important question about London. So London is the only global city in Europe. What do I mean by that? So London isn't simply brilliant at financial services and professional services. We're also brilliant at culture, tech, life sciences, higher education, and so forth. And so it's really important to understand that even though we've left the European Union, so we're outside the EU, our underlying strengths are still there. And so when somebody's thinking of, I'm not being pejorative or negative in any way about Frankfurt or Dublin or Paris or, Madrid, and thinking about going there, and then compares and contrast all we have to offer in London, I hope they choose London rather than those cities, because that's the same point about not being complacent. And so I spend a lot of time making sure our theatres are great, our museums are great, life sciences is doing well, we're attracting talent, I'm working with the universities. We had a big campaign to attract tourists to come to London and so forth, because we can't rest on our laurels. There are issues in relation to a lack of financial passporting with London and the EU. The good news is, notwithstanding the challenges of Brexit, London is back, London is booming, and people are invested in the UK. Bloomberg's European headquarters is guess where? In London. Uber's European headquarters is guess where? London. I give other examples, the JP Morgans, the Morgan Stanleys, and so forth. They've got a presence in the EU, clearly, a market of 500 million, but they've got a big presence in London as well. And the great thing about London is not simply those various sectors, but also the pipeline of talent that we have in London as well, which is really important.
Hi, my name is Zinnia. I work in technology policy, and I'm also a journalist who focuses on South Asian issues specifically. My question to you is, as London develops and it becomes more technologically advanced and as it becomes more sustainable, what are you doing to ensure that vulnerable populations are taken care of, whether it's immigrants, whether it's the elderly, whether it's people with disabilities? Because as a city becomes smarter, and technology can't necessarily always be trusted to take care of those that are underrepresented or vulnerable, what are you doing to ensure that they're taken care of?
Cracking question. So one of the things when I was campaigning to be mayor, I did was, one of my slogans was, a mayor for all Londoners. A mayor for all Londoners. And that's really important, because once I became mayor, there was a phrase that civil servants would use, and the phrase was, inverted commas, hard to reach communities. And I said, they're not hard to reach. They're underserved by us. We're hard to reach. We've got to flip the mindset in relation to the services we provide. Public transport isn't public transport if disabled people can't use it. And there's no point, having more and more ultra-fast broadband, which we've got, if there are some communities there's a lot of, digital inequality. And one of the things that's fascinating during the pandemic was, those who middle class, certain types of jobs were actually as productive, other people weren't. 3 reasons. They didn't have the right kit, they didn't have the right broadband, ultra-fast broadband, and they weren't aware how to use the kit. And we're addressing all 3 issues with the Chief Digital Officer to try and address those inequalities. But it's a really important issue for us, how we make sure those who are disenfranchised, vulnerable, get help. So there's a number of things we're doing. So this year, for the first time in the history of our city, we're paying from City Hall for every child below the age of 11 to receive a free school meal at lunchtime, nutritional and healthy. Really important. All the evidence suggests if a child eats a healthy meal, and by the way, that may be the only healthy meal they eat that day, they're more productive, they're more attentive, and so forth, right? Secondly, every person under the age of 18 has free travel in London. Thirdly, we're providing mentors to those young people who may not have a mentor in their lives. 100,000 young people will have a mentor, really important. Fourthly, we're making sure we invest in youth clubs and youth workers to give young people aspiration and hope, going forward, the right sort of mentorship and support that you need. Public transport, we're making sure it's accessible. So we opened a new line last year called the Elizabeth line. It goes from the west to the east in London. Is, I would say the best train line in the world at the moment. Every station is accessible on that line. 40 stations are accessible. We've got every one of our buses is accessible and so forth. But you're absolutely right. We've got to carry on evolving to find new ways to make sure London meets everyone's needs. So we've got more and more, for example, of our staff are trained to be dementia friends. Dementia is a big issue with an aging population. And so we carry on trying to be astute to the needs of Londoners that can be forgotten, not because they're hard to reach, because we're hard to reach. And so we've got peers advisors, disabled access group, and so forth. Community groups to help and advise us. So I don't organise the Diwali in the square. There's a committee of experts who are Hindus and Sikhs who understand the issue and organise that event. We empower them to do so, or Vaisakhi, or Eid, or Hanukkah. And so forth. I want to turn these passive consumers into active citizens.
Hi, thank you for being here. I wanted to go back to something you had mentioned earlier about climate change and all the wonderful things that you're doing in London and your collaboration with other cities, especially in the global south. How are you collaborating with cities like Bombay and Dhaka, and what's going on over there, and what's interesting that's happening over there, and what's the exchange been between the different cities?
Yeah, good question. So I was with actually the mayor of Dhaka yesterday, and my team's meeting the leadership from Mumbai tomorrow. So the first thing is to understand the consequences of climate change means that on the coastal areas, with water rising, it's leading to migration to those cities, Dhaka, Mumbai, and others. So we complain in New York and London about inward migration, but actually it's exponentially greater in those cities. So the sort of challenges that these cities face in the global south aren't simply the obvious ones, they're also indirect ones. Migration into the cities because of climate displacement. There's an amazing stat, which is at the moment, roughly speaking, half the world's population lives in cities. Roughly speaking, half the world's population. By 2050, it's going to be 2/3, right? Nothing wrong with growth. You've got to plan for that growth. And that, it could be a smart city. It could be new housing that's affordable. It could be how you make sure those people who go to the city not only have got accommodation, but skills to do the jobs that are being created. You've got to make sure the air is clean, and so forth. And so we're sharing best practice, not in a patronising Western saviour way, right? In a way, say, listen, you know your community best. What do you think the solutions are? What are the things stopping you making those solutions? How can we help? Good example is, you mentioned Dhaka and Mumbai. I'll give you a different one, Freetown, because I was with the mayor of Freetown today. She, at the mayor of Freetown, has been planting hundreds of thousands of trees because not just they capture carbon, obviously great for the environment, they stop mudslides. That wasn't us in the West saying plant more trees, them working that out, but they need financial support to pay for those trees and so forth. So it's listening to what the issues are. If there's expertise that is needed that you've not got locally, that can be provided, or finances need to be provided, the World Bank and so forth. And by the way, listen, isn't it great that the most senior person in the World Bank, Ajay Banga, I just wish, it's great stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Well, are we, Snigdha, is it your?
Preeti, do you want? So, we're so excited that we got to have the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Mayor, I have one question for you.
Shoot.
What's the one thing that you're most hopeful for seeing this room in front of you?
Well, the first thing I noticed, actually, I've got two children, they're both women, I've got two daughters, is not only is the founder somebody who's a woman, the first three questions were asked by women, and it's really important for me to recognize that fact, because, well, you know, if any of you met my daughters, they're now 23 and 22. What gives me hope? I know you're thinking he looks young, isn't it? And so what gives me hope is the next generation is just so sharp. They're just so engaged. But in particular, women are so empowered and so switched on. And I think that's what gives me hope, Sneak. Not just in relation to the fact there's so many female founders, there are so many women in leading positions of power and influence, but their energy is really, really exciting. I'll finish with a funny but a true fact. So your vice president, Kamala Harris, a huge source of pride to everyone. One of my best friends is a black British guy, and obviously I'm a black Asian guy. And we were arguing about whether Kamala Harris is South Asian or a black American, because we both wanted her, as we were trying to own her. But the point being is, women being in leadership positions should give us a real source of hope and encouragement, because frankly, the last 2,000 years, our gender's messed it up.
Yes.
And it's about time you took leadership positions and fixed the mess we made.
Thank you so much. A huge round of applause.